Well, Dave, thank you for joining us on Inside Power Station at Berkeley, NYC. It's good to see you.
My pleasure. Always great to see you.
Let's start with something that you're working on currently. An album you did with John Legend, Get Lifted. You're working on the 20th anniversary.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about what you're doing there.
Yeah, so that album was released in 2004. And yeah, amazingly, it's 20 years now. So I'm doing an expanded edition of it with like bonus material that we're releasing and some remixes and so forth. And we're releasing unreleased tracks from that time that we recorded either during the lead up to Get Lifted or, during the actual sessions of it. Songs that just didn't make the final cut that still are really great songs and new songs for the audience, for his audience that they haven't heard yet, of John singing how he was then, in the beginning of his career, a little more raw, soulful. And so I think for his fans, it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah. So, and it's been very interesting for me to go back and get into those sessions because first of all, it's from 20 years ago, and which is always weird. And I've just tended to look forward in my career, So to work on things that you did then and kind of like exhume these productions from when you were, for me, I was starting out, so I don't think of myself as quite as good as I probably am now. So it's kind of a trip,
Yeah. And did when you're listening back to some of that stuff, is there a tendency to be like, oh, we should have all these ideas for it and like reproduce it, or are you guys changing it, or is it going to be is it really just raw, accurate, exactly what it was? What's your...
Yeah, so it's a mix. There were one or two things that I did finish production for. So, for instance, we did this version of a song called Motherless Child that I had originally heard the version of Richie Havens doing at Woodstock, the original Woodstock, and we sort of made our own version of that, sort of more like Portishead-ish in the beat.
Yeah, which is really big at that time.
And at the time we were working on it. And I just loved it. I was really influenced by those Portishead records.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of more of that, like what we were doing with John at the time, sort of the classic soul meets hip hop, and so like for instance that one I had always wanted to put a string arrangement on it, but it would have cost a lot of money in the budget, especially at that time, to do it, and we didn't have the libraries then like we do now, the sample libraries where you could do it, and so that because we never picked it for the album, I never finished the production or the string arrangement, for example, and so when pulling that up now, I did a little bit of sprucing up to the drums, and then I finally did this string arrangement I always wanted to do on it, which is really fun.
Nice.
And so that one, required a little bit of production. A lot of it's just remixing. And, we have such great tools now that it's really been wild I've mixed a few of them already. And, things that were sort of problematic that I didn't pick up on then. Just problems with the sounds that I was able to sort of either RX or take care of and just clean up some, which is really great. And, and bring it to life. And it's just really rewarding to be hearing the rough from that time and the mix I'm doing now and A-Bing them, and then, hearing it sort of come more fully to life. So it's really fun, and I think they're going to be really great records to hear and fun for his fans.
Absolutely.
And, having worked with John a lot over my career, and when people know I work with him, the one thing I hear all the time is, for a lot of fans, Get Lifted is their favorite album, and it really had a big impact on sort of the culture at the time. It was a little different, what was going on in R&B. And so I think it's really cool to revisit this one now that it's 20 years later, because it is a fan favorite,
And what's the general, when I listen to stuff that, or see video of stuff that I did back then, it's an odd feeling that comes up. It's almost like a previous relationship I was in, or some kind of but you're still working with John. So what's the feeling that you get? Nostalgia, or just
it's cool. I'm kind of like, I feel like the music holds up pretty well. I'm like, oh, that holds up pretty well, but it also feels like someone else did it. Like it's like that the me then is a different person,
gotta be.
But it was a lot of that recording was guerrilla style. Some of it I recorded with an original Pro Tools M-Box in an apartment. Like there was a song we did that has Snoop Dogg on it called I Can Change, and there's horns on it. And those horns I recorded just, in a small apartment in Philadelphia at a drummer's house that I was just having a jam session with. I used to just kind of carry a 57 and an M-box around in my life. And so, we were just having a jam, and then my friend who was the horn player came over and I said, oh, hey, can you play on this beat, you know? And I got him to put these horn parts down. And then I ended up writing the song, the top line, everything with John, came this song, we ended up getting Snoop Dogg on, and I never re-recorded the horns. You know, so it just works, but just things like that, we were really just sort of, you know, going for it, you know. But my point is, it's like when you're at a different space a little later in your life, it does feel a little bit like that's somebody else's life, or like, wow, that who was that person doing all that sometimes interesting, a lot of times goofy stuff, you know.
And did you think at that time, if you can get back into your head back then, to see where both of your careers have gone and how long it's lasted, would you have ever, at the time, did you think you were on a path to that, or you just really had no idea?
Yeah, I don't know if we had an idea, or at least speaking for myself, if I had an idea that it, you know, go on this long in terms of a working relationship. But I think we were just thinking much more immediately, you know, but we were just steady and working on these things and heads down and just kind of cranking away at it. So it was almost like you didn't really come up for air to think that much about longevity necessarily, you know, just trying to make each piece great in the moment. And, you know, I mean, we were really inspired by Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, you know, which of course you were a part of. And that was really like the blueprint for what we were trying to do in my mind with Get Lifted, or with John's project, even prior to Get Lifted. When I first started working with him, that's what I was thinking, you know. He's got this classic soul voice, and, you know, I wanted to do what sort of Lauren had set out with her project, which in my mind was that hip hop meets sort of classic soul. And I mean, we can't, you know, when you live through that at a time, it was so huge, humongous. 1998, Miseducation of Lauryn Hill was incredible, right? You know, and obviously, you know, you have all that experience with that. And then, as we both know, you know, our background singers for that time were Lauren's background singers, Candace, Lanisha, and Tara. Exactly. You come into one of our shows. So, you know, we had that tied in, and of course, John having played on the Miseducation. It was just kind of, part was all just fun, you know, and so there was a direction there, which was nice, you know, so we were really inspired by that.
Yeah, there's a funny story from back then. Tara, the background singer that we knew, that introduced, I think brought John to Lauren's recording, and that's how he got on there. And she wanted me to work with some singers, and she like played a couple singers for me, and one of them was John. And she's like, oh, he's in college. Where do you go to college?
Penn,
right?
Yeah.
But I think he was singing in a more of a acapella, but and she played like a non-soul R&B song, and I was like, I don't think that's not the kind of music I want to do. And I remember like, it was pretty funny. That worked out really well for me. And so but that was funny. It's funny how those crews were all kind of intermixed also with the roots, and
that's right. So we were in Philadelphia, and you know, it was really at the time what was considered neo soul was a big movement happening in Philadelphia with the roots guys, and you know, Questlove was producing the D'Angelo album, so D'Angelo was on the scene, Flowetry, and Jasmine Sullivan was like a young girl coming up there. Jaguar Wright was a singer in that sort of area who was doing the thing. So, you know, I was a musician going around and jamming at clubs and things like that, and a lot of these same people were like on the scene. James Poyser playing keys. You know? So, you know, at any given night, you may walk into a jam session with Questlove sitting on drums, James Poyser on keys, and Common rapping or something, you know. I remember that happening. There was a lot going on, and there was like a spirit in the area at the time going on around that thing. So it had a lot of propulsion to you know, inspiring one to do things.
Since we're talking about Philly, you were born and raised in Philly?
Actually, South Jersey, a little bit south of Philadelphia, but relatively close. So, you know, I grew up with my father liking Philly sports teams and all that, you know. So, so South Jersey, but sort of outside of Philadelphia,
Cool. And then what was that journey like up to the John and everything?
I moved to Philly really just to start doing music. I had started playing guitar and I was really into it. And I was kind of like, I'll try to work at some recording studios and maybe be a recording engineer or something and do music, There was at one point I was considering going to like a conservatory in Arizona, like something like Full Sail, right? But I didn't do that, and I just sort of moved there and just kind of got into the music scene. I did get an internship in a recording studio. It was a big, full-fledged, like commercial studio, and multiple rooms, SSL, Neve consoles, tape machines, and all that. And yeah, so I became like an intern there, and spent a lot of time there making coffee and vacuuming floors, and just really hanging around a lot, because I didn't really have much else to do. I was like working part-time at a restaurant to make rent, and then I was just so interested in being fully immersed. So
up until this point, were your parents or your family or whatever supportive of whatever you're doing, or what did they think you were doing, or what?
Yeah, I think they didn't really know much about it. They just kind of left me alone, and
wow.
I was starting to play guitar and record, and I had set up a little thing in our basement where I had my little multi-track and cassette recorder, and just recording guitar and bass, and had a little Elise's drum machine. Sometimes I would just try to emulate productions and remake them, like anything from like a KRS-One song to like a Robin Trower song. I remember doing this. I remember doing a Lenny Kravitz song. Just what I would do is I would just remake the drums, replay the bass, the guitars, and sort of learn arrangements that way. I remember doing like Marvin Gaye, "I Want You," and like some James Brown stuff. Yeah. And so kind of learning how to arrange with different things, like sort of like how it makes the machinery, like the guitar part doing this, the bass part doing this. And so I really started out just kind of like remaking things and learning it. And so I think, they probably saw me playing guitar sitting around the house or in the basement doing that. And they didn't.
So were you playing the drums too?
No, just programming. I never played drums, that would have probably been a bridge too far in our house. But I was able to play guitar.
That's interesting because your career, you play different instruments, and then you have production chops and engineering chops, and you're heavily involved, like even on the record you did with John, like you're now doing the remixes for those. So it's interesting that it makes sense that if you were like relearning these songs on different instruments, actually recording it, and then learning. So you're learning songwriting, you're learning the production, you're learning the engineering, like all at the same time. It kind of makes sense, where your career is now. But who told you to do that? Like, why did you even bother doing that?
I think I was just so fascinated by it. I was so interested in it. I was really consuming a lot of music around that time because it was all so new. And, I can remember there was a period where I would just, every night I'd fall asleep with the headphones on, listening to records. And I was really interested in guitar, and I was learning a lot, just transcribing by ear. So just developing my ear that way. It's interesting when you start out, you don't have all that. Music's like a wall of sound. You can't sort of break down the parts or anything, and then over time you can start to hear those component parts. So I think just all that listening I did, I was starting to hear that more and more, and then like trying to replicate some of it was helpful, and also trying to sort of distinguish what was going on.
So I'd love to talk about must be one of John's biggest songs and your biggest songs, and one of the biggest songs I think from the past like 50 years. All of Me. I don't know what the stats are on it, but it's
up there somewhere.
Probably played at almost every wedding that happens.
Funny. Yeah. Funny story is I actually was staying in Nashville one time. I rented an Airbnb, and in the neighboring garage, the woman had it open, and she was like working out inside of the garage. And we got to talking, and it came up, that I worked on that somehow, and she said she got married to it. So that must have been a trip, because she had the guy who was who made the record that she got married to staying in her house, in her Airbnb.
That's so funny.
Only in a town like Nashville.
What's the story there, like, and how that came about?
Yes, so John had the idea for the song, and when he brought it to me, I think he felt like it was special, and for him it was kind of like a song that it was about Chrissy, and so we started recording it, and we went through a lot of different versions of it for like the better part of a year. actually. So it started out much more, a little bit more of a bigger production. And so, you know, there's a version of All of Me that has like very John Bryan-y, like Chinese bells on it and things like that, you know, and some strings and like cello. So yeah, there's a version that had like guitar, like played through the Leslie, cello. I had a guy playing theremin on it.
Wow. Was it still a ballad?
It was, yeah.
Oh, it was still a ballad. Okay.
Still a ballad.
Yeah.
But it was a really great lesson in kind of, I think that's a fun thing to do actually with productions, like, you know, try a lot of things. If you're wanting to feel it out and see what can work, try a lot of things, and then ask yourself what it doesn't need. Can it hold up? You know, just start taking everything out, and does it hold up without it? You know, and if it can, it's a good thing to try, I think. And so we just kind of kept stripping it away till it felt right to John, and you know, and seemed right. And so that's kind of where it ended up. Yeah.
Wow. It's kind of a funny thing in art where you like, there's what you want it to be and maybe what you're into at the time or what you're vibing on, and then what it needs to be. Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Being a multi-instrumentalist and then having all these hats where you can produce, you can mix, write songs, how do you generally work with artists, or how do you even know where to start, or do you have like a method? Do you always pick up a guitar, or do you...
Well, usually it starts from the songwriting, and that can go a variety of ways. Sometimes, for me personally, I'll start from just a guitar or keyboards or piano or like a beat, you know. Usually for me, it's like chords, melody, then lyric. You know, sometimes I'll start from a lyrical concept, but oftentimes I'm starting with chords, then leading to a melody where I'm mumbling nonsense, and then, you know, trying to hit on words that work and then flesh out a concept from that. And I usually try to do that with the artist I'm working with too. I try to, you know, go that route. But depending on what their thing is or how they like to work, it's all open, you know. But usually I'm trying to focus on composition, you know, and then sort of flesh out production, you know, as needed, whether or not I'm doing it on my own or the artist is involved with that. So, you know, sometimes you don't have a lot of time with the artist. You know, maybe if I'm working with a pop artist who's just flying into New York to work with me for a couple of days, you know, I'm usually trying to get a song written in a session, you know, or at least most of it, and that could be anywhere from 3 hours to 8 hours or something. And then if I know I don't have the artist long, I would try to get all of the vocals recorded, even before I record anything else, really. I just record enough, like, of a basic track to have a vibe to record vocals to, knowing I can re-record all those things or, you know, fill out the arrangement later, because I'm trying to get as much as I need from the artist while I have them. Right. You know, so I'll try to know what I need in terms of the vocals, and then on the spot sort of know what I need in terms of the vocal arrangement, any harmonies or things like that, doubles, triples, and get them in a booth, which, you know, sometimes can be cool because it's so new, but sometimes also tricky because, you know, they may not have committed all of it to memory so much yet, you know what I mean? They're still learning the melodies, things like that, because it's so new. So it's kind of an interesting process. But so largely I'll try to get the tempo down, because, you know, then you're set if you got the tempo, chords, get the vocals recorded, and then I'll build the arrangement around that. Largely that's how I've been doing it a lot lately. And, but, you know, it can go a variety of different ways depending on who you're working with. Or if, you know, if I'm working with a band and we're doing live tracking, it can be a little different, you know. And then usually once we're all kind of good on the production, then sort of go into the mixing process, you know.
Nice.
Yeah.
Dave, I want to thank you for joining us here on Inside Power Station at Berkeley, NYC.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Before you go, I'd like to get some advice from you, see what you would say to your younger self, probably from like the journey you've had, and if you could look back and tell yourself something, what would that be? And then maybe also some advice for other producers or artists that are coming up.
Yeah, well, to my younger self, I'd probably just say relax a little, chill out a little bit. You know, along the way, you can get pretty like anxious, you know, trying to make it. But in general, I think that it's really just about the doing. You know, you're learning through the doing a lot. I think if you can get good mentorship, that's great. If you're in a program, that's great, because, you know, what you're doing is kind of fast tracking students and sort of giving them tools and lessons and helping them in ways that otherwise they would be taking much longer and poking around in the dark, like I did for us. So I know that process because I didn't really have that. And, I've also mentored students myself, and that's what I see as the benefit of that, is just being able to sort of say, hey, listen, based on what we know here, if you do this, you can do this, that, and the other, and really help with either recording, writing, production. And so those tools are really invaluable, or that experience can be really invaluable. So I think, the advice would be like, avail yourself of that if you can. And then it's really in the doing. You got to create a lot. Just do it, and try to do it in a way that's thoughtful, where you're trying to progress and learn along the way and improve, always kind of be willing to examine it and be willing to stress test your beliefs. I think that's a big thing. Oftentimes we, even beyond music in our lives, we get kind of tied to certain belief systems. And I think it's good to challenge those in ourselves a lot, because that's how you grow. And, and if you don't know everything, then you're not right about everything, right? So I just think always be willing to question those things and, trying to be better all the time.
Yeah, I think about you in that basement, just learning random songs you're into, and it's just like, trust the process.
Yeah, and I'm still kind of doing that in a lot of ways. I still transcribe songs. I still hear things I like and want to know what chord this is, or what melody that is, or whatever, or hear a sound. It's such an amazing time to make records, right? Like, we have all these amazing tools at our disposal. So if we have the taste and the know-how, like, we can do so much. It's an incredible time. Like the resurgence and all the hardware synths, and what's being done with guitar pedals, and what's being done with DAWs and machine learning, and it's out of control. So it's a magical time to make music.